Hello, welcome to the podcast tutorial. My goal is to be able to cover everything it takes to make the podcast. So let's just go over this outline real quick. Capturing, right? We have to record the service. So that's pretty much assumed here that it's already been done. We've got the whole morning service. We're going to talk about how to edit the audio, make it louder, make it better, get rid of everything that we don't need, and then bring in our introduction, quick music intro. We'll talk about how to export the file and convert it to MP3, make it easy for people to download, listen to, wherever, whenever. And then MP3s have metadata, things like who the artist is, the track name. We can also add our graphics to the file, kind of embed it in there, just kind of a bonus step. Then we'll talk about uploading the file into SoundCloud, and then once it's in SoundCloud, we're going to make sure everything's organized, easy to find. Alright, so let's talk about the capture. Like I said, we kind of assume that you recorded the whole morning service, and we know that the service is about an hour long, which we can see in the timeline. We're just past an hour. I like to hit record before the service even begins. That way I don't have to think about it. And that way I won't forget to hit record before the sermon starts and end up missing the introduction or anything. So that's the idea, to capture everything, then get rid of everything that we don't want. Okay, let's talk about editing the audio. We can see from the capture the first song here. It's fairly loud. This is a kind of a scale of volume, and announcements are a little bit quieter. We got a few more songs, and then the sermon's pretty uniform. And then we can see the dead space as the transition from music to the sermon begins. Zoom in here. Danny closes in prayer, and then we transition. So we got to get rid of everything but the sermon. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all that music with the selection tool. So I'll start the selection, click and hold. I'm going to hit the zoom to fit button. See, my selection remains, and as I put the cursor on the edge, you can see how it changes to a pointer finger. So I'll leave that pointer finger, click and hold, and then delete all the music. I'm going to zoom in real close here. It looks like there's some extra noise. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. Same at the end of the sermon. The majority of the time, I'm in prayer and amen. This week.
All right, God bless you. Go out in the world this week. Share the gospel.
So couple quick notes, we'll leave that in there, and then the rest of this is noise, so we'll get rid of all this. So we should have the sermon and nothing but the sermon. Sometimes the recording continues, and we don't want any conversations with the pastor and a guest or anything like that, so we'll make sure everything is trimmed out. So that leaves just the sermon. So two things we're going to do. Because this is pretty much raw audio from the board, we have to do some processing. We're going to do compression and then set the overall level. So it takes two steps. So I'm going to double click. Still have my select tool. Double click selects everything. And we're going to add some compression. So essentially make it louder. So I'm going to Effect, Compressor. The key things here, all this is always the same, but just a review. Ratio is pegged at 10 to 1, which is good for speech. It keeps everything in a nice volume level. Attack is as low as it'll go, and release is just 2 seconds or so. Make sure both boxes are checked, and hit OK, and this will take a few minutes. Now after the compression, you can see full volume here, and what we have to do now is set the overall level. That's because when we upload to SoundCloud, the file is converted, and if it's full volume, which is 0 dB full scale, it doesn't like that. It ends up being distorted and weird. So what we're going to do is go to Effect and go to Amplify. While we're not technically amplifying it, making it louder, we're making it quieter. This is what we're going to use. So I'm going to put -2 as the new peak. Don't want to allow clipping, so I'll leave that unchecked. And it's pretty basic math. The compression brought everything up to 0, and I want -2, so it's saying that we're going to bring everything down by -2. So we'll hit OK again. This will take a few minutes. Okay, perfect. Now we can see everything's come down just a little bit to -2. Okay, so far we've trimmed the sermon out, and we've done some processing to get the levels good. Now we want to import our quick little introduction music, and we'll go to File, Import, Audio, and the Mac is set up the very same way. This is Windows obviously, but right on the desktop is a sermon audio folder. You might have to search around, but there's an intro file. I'll bring this sample one in, and what we got to do is align these, because right now they're just playing over each other. So I'm going to zoom way in here to the beginning of the file. It's a bit much. And I'll shift this to dB scale. Now we can kind of see the music fades out, kind of as this waveform is tapering off. So we want the sermon to start as the music is fading out. I'm going to click on the time shift tool and drag this out to about there. So now as the music's fading out, the sermon starts. And we're going to make sure that this introductory file, whatever it may be, is at the same level as this. So just to be sure, I'm going to go to my select tool, double click, go to Effect and Amplify again. I can see here that it's a little bit louder than we want it. So I'm going to put -2 here. Oops. And this says that's going to bring it down just over a dB to bring it to -2. So now we know this overall volume matches the sermon volume as well. So that's cool. Let's listen.
Encourages you.
Well, it's great to see all of you here today. Appreciate you.
So ignore that distortion. My computer wasn't set up perfectly, so it clipped a little bit, but you get the idea. Music's fading out, sermon starts. And that is about all we need to do for the editing. Alright, now that we're done editing the file, we're now ready to export. So all we need to do is go to File, Export Audio, and let's talk about some naming convention here. The file name for the MP3 file should always follow this format. We have the date, the sermon series name if we're in a series, and then the sermon title of the individual sermon for that week. So as an example, we have the date. We're in the upside down series. I like to put which part we're on, part 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then the sermon title for that day. So I'll put this down here. We can put that file on the desktop in the sermon audio folder. So we'll say 12-10-17 upside down, part 1, claims of Christmas. We're always going to use MP3. I like to leave it at constant 160 kilobits per second. Joint stereo is fine. And when you hit save, it'll take a few minutes because So we have 45 minutes or so of audio. You can go ahead and put in the year and I guess the artist name is LifeSource Church. Okay, let's talk about adding artwork to the MP3 file. This is kind of a bonus step. It's nice to have, but not necessary. So now that we've got the MP3 file exported from Audacity, we have to add that file to iTunes. iTunes has this built-in editor, so you can kind of modify your files. So we're going to go to File, Add File to Library, and we can see our MP3 is on the desktop in the sermon folder. So I'll add that, and you don't see anything happen because it just adds it to the library. I find it's quick to just do a search. There it is. So all we got to do is go to Get Info, go to Artwork, Add Artwork, and you may have to search around for the graphics, but there should be a square graphic for the sermon or the sermon series in the Dropbox or on the desktop or wherever. So just hit Open. You can make sure the information is correct. Year, the church name, and the title. That should be fine because we did that in Audacity, but just double check. And just hit OK. iTunes will do its thing, and our file now has the graphics. So when someone downloads the file from SoundCloud, they actually get the original MP3 that we made, and it just kind of looks nice. Like I said, it's not necessary, but it's kind of cool. And that's all you gotta do. Okay, let's talk about the upload. Now we've got our MP3 file all ready to go, ready to release into the wild. So this is the SoundCloud.com homepage. I'm going to go ahead up to upload, choose file. Everything should be on the desktop in the sermon audio folder. You can see our export that we just made. Go ahead, open. There are a few things that we want to make sure we have checked off. We can go to the permissions real quick. You should see all orange. Okay, downloads enabled. That lets people actually download the MP3 file that we made, so they can take it offline with them. Then just make sure everything else is orange checked off. Alright, so we'll go to basic info. We'll put the image in. There should be a graphics. You might have to do some searching either in Dropbox or on the desktop for the sermon series graphics. So go ahead and pick that. And put this private just because it's a demonstration. For genre, you can pick religion, spirituality. It kind of just gives a generic tag for people to look for this stuff. And SoundCloud puts its own spaces in. If you look here, this is the actual MP3 file name that we made. Right? 12:10:17. Right. So it pulls it in, but it goes ahead and puts its own spaces in. So we gotta make that look pretty. We'll go ahead and delete that and clean this up. So yeah, upside down, part 1. Claims of Christmas. Make sure there are no typos. Make sure it's uniform with all the other sermon series. If I go ahead and look at like a playlist, all of our sermon series are always grouped as playlists. So we want to make sure everything looks the same, just so it looks continuous, uniform, everything like that. So make sure it looks good, and make sure everything's orange. And you go ahead and hit save. That will upload the track. So we have all sorts of tracks, and as I just mentioned, to make things more organized and easy to find, I like to have a playlist. So at the beginning of a new sermon series, we'll have to create a new playlist, which I can show you. Tracks. If I have a new track, it gives you the option to add to a playlist. You can create a new one here. I always like to call it sermon series. That. Now we've got a playlist, and as we add tracks, we can add those individual tracks to that playlist. So these are all my demos. I have them as private so nobody actually sees these, but this is a real track from December 10th, and I'll just make sure it's actually on the playlist here. And as the weeks go on, I'll continue to add the tracks to the playlist. So that keeps all the files organized, easy to find, and that's pretty much it.